we need to talk about what just happened. Because Oda just confirmed in one of the most dramatic ways possible one of the leading theories about the connection between Emu and the Gorosei. Something we all thought might be a strong possibility after Emmett's hockey explosion in chapter 1123, and we got to see the way it affected all six of them. But now we know for sure. And at the same time, Oda might have also revealed to us the only way to actually defeat these seemingly immortal old men, but based on what we find out in this chapter, that might prove to be even harder to achieve than any of us originally thought. Or not, it could actually end up being even easier. We don't have enough info to say as of now one way or the other. But for now, let's get to the main topic, Saturn. Because just hours after what happened with Emmett and the Straw Hats escaping, we see the Marines cleaning up the mess they made, which, surprisingly enough, they are doing a much better job at. We see them loading the Seraphim, which, by the way, we find out they actually have to be charged like you would your phone, so yeah, that's new. And they're making plans to do something with the Mark III Pacifistas and the robotic sea beasts, but we don't find out exactly what in this chapter. My best bet, the sea beasts are going to be moved to Marijoa because they are programmed to follow Vegapunk's direct orders. And as far as they're aware, York is currently the only Vegapunk left alive, and she's working now directly with the World Gov. So basically, they're just adding the sea beasts to their arsenal, which is good for them because I think the plan is to get rid of the Pacifistas. I know Venus purposely chose not to destroy the Mark IIIs in order to keep them for future use, but that was when he assumed that between the five of them that they'd be able to take out Bonnie. But with her escaping with the Straw Hats and still having a higher authority over the Pacifistas than even the girls say, it's way too dangerous for them to keep them in use. So I can imagine that there's going to be a mass recall on all the discount Kumas around the world in order to keep them from falling under her control. Which, let's be honest, an army of giant bear robots being under direct control of a 12-year-old, that is just a recipe for chaos. But that is chaos that I am 1000% down for because I can just imagine at the end of the series, an army of Kumas being led by Bonnie showing up near the end of the final war. Now, Bonnie still having the highest authority over the robot clones of her dad does bring up the question of what they're going to do with Vesper, because while we haven't seen it yet, I would imagine that Vegapunk did the same thing with him that he did with the Pacifistas. And even if he didn't, that should be a major concern for the Gorosei. So he might also get put on the bench until they can determine if she could possibly control him too. Something that York is going to have to personally oversee because Saturn unfortunately comes up with a sudden case of, well, death in this chapter, and his replacement doesn't seem like he's exactly the scientific type. So, what happens to Saturn in this chapter? Well, he's doing a quick debrief with all the Vice Admirals, which, by the way, it's kind of weird that Kizaru wasn't there at all, but I imagine that he's still sitting around being depressed about what happened with Vegapunk, though I doubt Saturn would care that much about that and let him off the hook, so it is kind of weird that he wasn't here during this meeting. Then, almost out of nowhere, black smoke started emitting from Saturn's body, and he fell to his knees in pain, holding his neck as if he was choking. The Vice Admirals began to panic, calling for medics to come right away and try to help, but it was too late. It only took a few moments, but in a flash of black lightning and smoke, the once very much alive Elder Star had been reduced to nothing but bones. He not only failed to stop Vegapunk's message from playing for the world to hear, but more importantly, he let Joy Boy get away. And because of that, Emu deemed that he was no longer useful, replacing him with the now Saint Figureland Garling. Going to be honest, that was not the way I expected him to go. But admittedly, it is kind of karma in a way, because for one, not even minutes before his untimely demise, Saturn attempted to unalive Vice Admiral Doberan for simply asking a question. Now, I mean, obviously, it was a question he shouldn't have asked, but still. And more importantly, it turns out that the Straw Hats getting away was ultimately his fault. His in this case being Saturn's, not Doberman's. Gotta make that clear. Because we find out just before his shocking death that it was actually Saturn who had ordered the scientists 200 years ago to hide Emmett away so that they could study it for future use. Which led to the present day where just before they launched their final attack on the Straw Hats, Bonnie, Kuma, and the Giants, Emmett managed to stop them. Had he done what he was supposed to and actually destroyed Emmett, then there's a good chance that Luffy would not have made it off the island. I would have much preferred the two of them playing a bigger role in his ultimate downfall, or at the very least being present for it, instead of it happening after their interaction and without their knowledge. Like, if I was Bonnie, on the one hand, I would be extremely excited to find out that the old man who had enslaved and tortured my parents for years and tried to kill me multiple times was gone. But at the same time, I would be a bit disappointed that I wasn't there and played a hand in his ultimate demise. But even with my disappointment, there is still a lot of good news for us coming from this whole event. Now we know for certain the Five Elders' immortality is directly connected and under control of Emu. At any point, Emu could take it from them and bestow it on someone much more fitting to their goals, such as he did with St. Garling, who, as one of the God's Knights, is more likely a skilled fighter and will perform better than Saturn did when faced with Luffy. Because if we really sit down and think about it, Saturn was only relevant in that battle due to his broken regeneration. Without it, he would have been down for the count after Kuma's first punch. In fact, you could honestly say the same for Mars and Jupiter. The three of them weren't really too helpful in the overall scheme of things, because in my opinion, they were way too reliant on their yokai abilities, and that really wasn't doing much for them. Now, in all fairness, you could say the same thing for Mercury. He was very reliant on his yokai abilities during this arc, but until Emmett came into the picture, he was kind of carrying the ground forces on his back, like my friends do for me whenever we play Call of Duty, so he gets a pass. The only one who actually seemed to have any fighting skills outside of his yokai form was Venus. Had they had one more skilled fighter among them, then things might have been more in their favor. So now that Garling's one of the elders, I'm looking forward to seeing how he deals with the kind of chaos that was Egghead. Also, I wonder if he's going to get the same kind of yokai powers that the others have, and if so, what will his end up being? Hopefully not just a rehash of Saturn's, but something unique to just him. Anyway, now that we know that Emu has this level of control over the Gorosei, it does bring up the question of how often have they done this? We already know that Jupiter is, or I guess was, the youngest out of the five of them, assuming that Garling actually is younger than him despite him not looking it. But were the other four part of the original lineup? Who had Jupiter's spot before him? There are a ton of questions this now opens up, but unfortunately, I don't see Oda answering them anytime soon. If he even ends up answering those questions in the manga, because based on recent track record, it's much more likely that he'll probably answer them in an SBS. One thing he does answer, however, is what happened to Edison, because the last time we saw him, it was kind of left up in the air if he had actually passed or not. I, like most, had assumed that, yeah, the last shot we saw of him was a classic death scene. He's gone, we can kind of move on now. But, well, I was wrong. Turns out Oda got us again and made us think Edison died, all so that he could shock us with the second big reveal in this chapter. All four of the dead Vegapunk satellites fused together in one body with Edison as the head. Going to be honest, not exactly digging this look, but it is still very cool to see that these four are still alive in some sense. Much better than the implication that they were all living inside Glove's head. Though I do wonder if we'll see them eventually all transfer to their own individual bodies or continue to share just one. Now, it is worth noting we don't see or hear from the main Vegapunk in this chapter at all, so the jury's still out on him. But even with his body gone, his brain is still intact, so I guess we can say he is also still alive. And speaking of the brain, the four of them managed to outsmart York once again and snag Punk Records, using the Sky Clouds to steal it away from the world government's control, but they did have to leave behind the rest of the Labro phase. And man, I'm telling you, with each and every chapter, it's getting harder and harder to tell if York is actually a Vegapunk or not, because she does not seem to be as smart as the others. Anyway, despite how cool their little heist was, I'm not sure this is something that can really be considered a win, considering that despite not being in the same place as the brain, York still has full access to it. But I guess the benefit is that she's not the only one in control of it anymore. The other four are. And since it's implied that they're heading to Wadaria to surprisingly meet up with the person that trained Nami during the time skip, Herodotus, wild that they're connected by the way, yet at the same time not too surprising because they do both use artificial clouds to float up their islands. But since they're going there, if they can contact Lilith and tell her to meet up with them, then they can get her reconnected to Punk Records as well. Though I guess that means any chance of her joining the crew might be out the window now. Which hey, that just means that a potential spot just reopened for Stussy, who might be making a reappearance soon now that we had Lucci directly address her in his brief appearance in this chapter. He says that she died, but I'm going to guess based on the face that Kaku makes during that scene, that that's what he told Lucci to avoid him trying to hunt her down. And I love this little moment for Kaku because you can really tell he's feeling conflicted here. He lied to his closest friend in order to protect another. That is not going to sit well with him in his head. Nor will it sit well with Lucci once he eventually finds out that she's actually still alive. And I'm honestly looking forward to seeing how he handles that betrayal. Because prior to this arc, I would have said that he'd probably take out Kaku without a second thought for letting her escape. But now I'm not so sure. The Catman has actually evolved during this arc into a character that might have some actual depth, and I was not prepared for that, but I am 100% down to see where it goes. As I am with Dragon, because finally, after waiting this entire arc, it seems like he is about to finally make his move. All it took was Vegapunk announcing the world was going to end for him to choose to, but hey, I'll take it. Now the only question is, what is that move going to be? Is he going to take advantage of the chaos that's forming from the food shortage in Marijoa and the fact that the world gov will be spread thin, trying to stop others from getting to One Piece to launch a direct attack? Will he make a play for the treasure himself, trying to use the power that it will give him to change the world to one that's better suiting for the everyday people? Or will he put all his chips into his son achieving the treasure and the kind of world that he'll create in the near future? The answer to that question is something that we will hopefully find out very, very soon. But let me know in the comments down below, which one do you think Dragon will choose?